Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. You are looking at aerial footage from earlier today of more than 100 migrant women and children arriving in San Diego, California. It's the third time in a week that undocumented children from toddler to teenage have arrived at Lindbergh Field, bound for immigration processing facilities in Southern California. NBC affiliate in San Diego reporting this morning that some Border Patrol agents had been placed under a gag order over public safety concerns. That caution after anti-immigrant protesters in Murrieta, California successfully blocked buses carrying migrant women and children from entering a Murrieta processing facility last week. Over the weekend, those protests continued.
Dozens waited for the possible arrival of another approximately 140 undocumented immigrants brought to California from Texas because of overcrowding and an influx of children crossing the border alone.
We'll send them aid, but it's too hard on the United States to support all of them.
5 people were arrested at Murrieta demonstrations after scuffles broke out between dueling protest groups. The buses they were waiting to block never arrived. Meanwhile, in Washington, there is a rising chorus from elected officials demanding immediate deportation of the children, many of them unaccompanied, who've been streaming to the U.S. border from Central America.
The thing this administration needs to do is immediately deport these families, these children. I know it sounds harsh. I know it sounds difficult, but they're creating a crisis at this time that is actually going to harm these children.
Send these children back to their homeland and tell the countries in question, if you don't keep them and take care of them, we're going to cut all aid off.
Joining me now, Congressman Luis Gutierrez, Democrat from Illinois. He's chairman of the Immigration Task Force of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Congressman, do you have a response to your colleague, Raul Labrador?
Yeah, I think, you know, he's a good lawyer. He's smarter than that statement would lead you to believe. No, he just is. I worked with him for months in the Gang of 8, 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats trying to craft immigration legislation together. He's very knowledgeable, and he's a lawyer. He specializes a lot in immigration, and he's just wrong. What I would say to Raul is, it's not that it's difficult. It's not that it's harsh. It's illegal. It is well-established jurisprudence in the United States. And I'm just going to cite just two. 2002 Homeland Security Act. It says you must treat unaccompanied minors differently. And it codifies an agreement between Flores and Reno in 1997 that says, look, when children arrive, you can't expedite their removal. You must give them a court case. You must put them in the least restrictive environment, and you need to put them in a place which is best for them, taking into consideration their best interest. And that's usually a parent. But wait, that was 2002. Homeland Security. Dick Armey introduced the legislation. George Bush signed it. But in 2008, George Bush signs another piece of legislation about human trafficking, right? It basically deals with human trafficking that now says, wait, unaccompanied minors must, in 72 hours, be released, right, to Health and Human Services, their Office of Refugee Resettlement, and be placed in the least and have a court case. So this notion of just deport them all, you cannot. If that's what you want, then I just find it astonishing that on the one hand, the Tea Party says the President of the United States acts like a dictator, acts like an emperor, and then on the other hand, they say, just forget about the law, Mr. President, and just deport them all. But maybe they want the president to do this so that they can have some articles of impeachment.
Well, so
I'm not quite sure what they're
doing. Congressman Labrador, I thought his and Senator Graham's comments this weekend were important kind of weather vanes in the trajectory of where the Republican Party has been on this issue, particularly now amidst this kind of humanitarian crisis of the border, which has been turned into an argument against immigration reform, but not just an argument against immigration reform. It seems to me that there was an open question after 2012 whether Republicans would support immigration reform. We're now here in 2014, 5 months before the election, and it's not just they're not supporting comprehensive immigration reform, they are calling for deportation, for mass deportation, as a kind of policy position they're coalescing around.
Look, the children, the administration is following the law. And the law is very well established. And look, I didn't go to law school, but I read about the law, and it's pretty well established. No, it's good for us to laugh because it's just silly what they're saying. Now, if they want to change it, here's what I say, Chris. Sit down at the table with Democrats and Republicans, because when these laws were crafted, especially, it was a good time in America, right? 2008, 2002. It was a good time for politicians to get together and agree, right, that children should be treated differently. And that is still the law of the land, and if you want to change it. And I just want to make sure that we understand one thing. Look, Honduras is the murder capital of the world. It's quickly followed by El Salvador and Guatemala. The children aren't coming from Mexico. We have a different policy with Mexico. Yep. We send them right back. It's quick, usually within 48 hours. Look, they're not coming from Belize or Panama. They're not coming from Costa Rica. They're not coming from Nicaragua. They're coming from those 3 countries. It's a humanitarian crisis, and we shouldn't be... How would I say? We shouldn't exploit the children and simply say we're going to deport them back. Yeah. We just can't. These are children, and these are very dangerous places for us to be sending them back to.
Congressman Luis Gutierrez, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
As the congressman just alluded to, at the heart of the border crisis is a rumor. It's a rumor that has been circulated throughout Central America, countries like Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala, where most of these unaccompanied children are coming from. And it's a rumor about the ability of young children and families fleeing violence in their countries to obtain what has been called in Spanish a permiso, or permission to stay in the United States. Now, last month, a Guatemalan woman named Connie explained how she heard of permiso to MSNBC's Alexandra Pelosi.
Who told you that America was going to take care of you if you came here with your son?
Lo que pasa que yo vi cuando escuché a una amiga, dijo vamos para los estados, dijo que ya están dando una oportunidad de ahora a las guatemaltecas para cruzar para allá, dijo, con los niños. Y dije, ¿es cierto eso? Sí, dijo, a mí me han contado, o sea que se fueron los rumores así, contando desde lejos llegó ese rumor hasta donde estábamos nosotros viviendo. Y entonces esperé que ella se viniera y ella llegó, ya cuando ella estaba aquí me llamó y me contó que sí era cierto lo que decía la gente.
When she got here, she called me to say it was true what people were saying. Now, Republicans have been quick to point to such rumors as evidence. The Obama administration has basically invited a crisis by issuing a 2012 memorandum known as DACA, for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That essentially stopped deportations of immigrants who'd been brought to the United States as young children.
I think that this humanitarian crisis can be laid directly at the feet of President Obama as a result of his DACA policy in 2012.
As soon as the administration in 2012 decided to do DACA, which is the Deferred Action Program, that's when the number of children started moving up.
I would argue that the misinformation comes from the president's own programs, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Word's getting back home. If you come to the United States and you're a child, you just tell them you want to come in and they're going to let you in.
But here's the thing. Blaming DACA never quite made sense for a whole host of reasons. First of all, the surge of unaccompanied minors from Central America started in 2011. DACA was issued in 2012. And DACA doesn't apply to anyone who arrived in this country after 2007. The real source of the permiso appears to be a different law passed both by the House and the Senate without objection and signed by George W. Bush. It's a 2008 law meant to combat sex trafficking. It strengthened protections for unaccompanied minors coming from countries other than Mexico, giving them access to a federal asylum officer and a chance to make their case before a judge. And that's the law that both Republicans in Congress and the White House now want to roll back. It's not DACA. It's not the DREAM Act. It's not comprehensive immigration reform. It's a piece of legislation that was so uncontroversial, it passed on a voice vote. The White House has said it will ask Congress to make changes now to that 2008 law. And over the weekend, Republican Congressman Matt Salmon of Arizona says he plans to introduce a bill to make changes to the sex trafficking law that would send children back quickly. Meanwhile, the White House is taking pains to make it clear that most of the unaccompanied children coming across the border will not stay in this country.